Hello.
Yay. Hello.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Able Contemporary Gallery. I am Teresa Abel, and thank you for joining us tonight for the next in our series of artist talks. I am so pleased to be joined tonight by Nancy Kubale and Lori Schappe Youens. We are here to talk about their really outstanding exhibit in the gallery currently called Like Minded. I'm also joined by Ann Orleski, who's the gallery director, and Lauren Miller, who is the assistant gallery director. So thanks everybody for joining us. Before we start to talk to the artists, I'm going to tell you a little bit about them while we look at a video of their current installation. Nancy Kubale is a full-time ceramic and mixed media artist living 50 miles southeast of Asheville in the foothills of Rutherford County, North Carolina. Her work uses figures influenced by equal parts classical statuary and folk art to explore our shared human experience. Kubale is inspired by poetry, secular philosophy, religious texts, fashion, and contemporary culture, and addresses human pursuit of truth. Constructed using hand-building techniques, her works are layered with terra sigillata, slips, stains, oxides, and glazes, and often require 3 to 5 firings. The resulting ceramic sculpture is assembled with wood, metal, fiber, and found objects. Lori Schappe Youens creates colorful, highly texturized paintings reminiscent of abstract expressionism. For 30 years, Schappe Youens has split her time between 2 continents, having home both in the Midwest and in South Africa. Her work combines evocative imagery, enigmatic figures, and an intense palette which sometimes incorporates less conventional mixed media elements, such as sand, saffron, and tea, into her highly layered paintings. Schappe Youens paints largely intuitively, responding to the work through added layers as the painting evolves before her. These paintings develop a narrative through this process, symbolic elements emerging to tell an emotive story with insightful observations on the human condition, often with an element of humor. So thanks again for joining us.
Pleasure.
I will mention to everyone that Lori is a trooper because she's joining us from her home in South Africa right now. So it's what, 1 a.m. there?
It's actually 12.
Oh, okay.
Not so bad.
Not as bad. And Nancy is equally suffering with her 1 hour time difference from North Carolina.
Oh, poor me.
Oh, so Laura, you said you're having it's kind of dark because you're having a blackout right now?
Yeah, actually the power just came back on. We have intermittent load, what's called load shedding. I like to call it blackouts because that's what they are. It's just frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah.
The government can't quite get their act together to keep the power grid on. So anyway, we're troopers here in South Africa. On we march, paint and sculpt. So.
Yeah. So it is. It shows in your work. So we're going to talk about some specific things, but I just wanted to tell people listening to this talk that before this show, the two of you had never met. Being in the gallery, you may have been familiar with each other's work. The staff and I started to notice that there were these wonderful parallels thematically and aesthetically in what you were doing. And I was just so delighted when the two of you were interested in having this 2-person show. And then you were both here for the opening, which was fantastic. And of course, the two of you hit it off beautifully. And Like Minded just ended up being the perfect title for the show because even though you'd never met, I felt like you shared so many ideas, concepts,
right, exactly,
and approaches to your work. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. So Lauren, you have some pictures that you have chosen of some of the pieces in the show that are our favorites. So why don't you tell us what we're looking at?
Yeah, so the first one we're looking at here is a sculpture by Nancy Kubale called Sistas. And Nancy, can you tell us a little bit about this piece?
Yeah, when I got ready to start working on the show, I wanted to. I often think about, okay, what's the most important thing to say? What do I want to say? Because there's so much stuff out in the world now. There's just mass quantities of stuff, and it's like, well, don't just put more stuff out in the world. You know, if there's something that's worth saying, then that's okay, but not just more stuff. And I've been thinking a lot. I've gotten to the age where you get sort of a perspective on what's important, and importance is our community, our families, our connections, and so I wanted to make a piece about that, about family. I'm the youngest of three sisters, and both of my sisters live in Wisconsin, and I live in North Carolina, so we only get together a couple times a year. But I value that relationship so much. And I thought about all the baggage and all of the balloons that come with families. That, you know, there's always the things that we don't like about our families, or the things that we feel are negative, but there's also all the positive, and sometimes they're almost the same thing. It's like, you know, there are things that might bother me about one sister, and I realize that it's probably because it's the thing that bothers me about myself. And also, being the youngest, I spent a lot of my younger years watching how my sisters were living their lives, and watching the decisions they made and the outcomes that came from it. And sometimes good and sometimes bad. So I feel like they were like my first village and my first model of humanity.
And they were here at the opening, which was really lovely to see you all together. You know, in this piece, there are elements that are in many of your works, the fabulous patterns that you use. You have such a marvelous way with mixing patterns, juxtaposing that, the colors. But you have these really unique sort of singular shapes, that these little balls on tops of the heads, and these sort of weird wraps and things. So where did that evolve from?
I wanted to, I didn't want to fix the sculptures in a very specific time, place. I wanted them to be more timeless, and I felt like decorating the head was better than just doing hairstyles. And it's a lot more fun. But and you can put a certain amount of expression into that too. I think of the balls as like bubbles, almost like bubbles of joy, bubbles of happiness, because a lot of times they're very bright colors, or even thoughts, or the gray stripe around the forehead. When I found out that, you know, we had gray matter in our heads, it kind of stuck visually. I'm a very visual person, and I thought, well, my work, a lot of people will talk about figurative work as being narrative, but I think of it more as being contemplative, because most of the work comes from a place of contemplation, and so the gray reflects that thought, how we think about things.
And when I had the opportunity with my husband, Tim, to visit your studio last year, and you have pieces in your studio that were older, and, you know, you've been doing figurative clay for a while, but you were telling me about how you got into doing ceramics in general. Can you quickly tell the audience about that?
Yeah, I went to art school, but at that time, clay was considered a craft. So my art school did not have a clay program. And my senior year, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to earn a living. So I took a bunch of clothing construction courses, and ended up working as a costumer in New York. And long story short, New York to Massachusetts to North Carolina because of costuming. And then I started just buying pottery because North Carolina has a huge heritage of ceramics. And I started just buying pottery all the time. And I thought, if I'm going to keep buying this, I need to learn how to do it. So I took a course at a community college, and I was like, well, there's no way I could make the same bowl forever. I'm just not cut out for it. But oh, look what else you can do. And so I began building the figure like you would clothing as a flat pattern. And I've always been drawn to stripes and polka dots and bold colors. And I frequently try and tone it down and go, oh, maybe I could just make it a little bit calmer, but I'll get to the end and then I'll slap some color on it. I just can't let it go.
Good. And then, I mean, we're going to have a lot of things to talk about. We're going to talk about a few other pieces, but one of the other big things that this piece shows is you have often an introduction of text on the backs of the pieces. And how long have you been doing that for?
Oh, I think since the beginning. I've always, it's kind of like a window into what the thought is. And I think when I first started doing it, they actually were kind of like little framed windows, but eventually it just became, I wanted to make sure that the figures still stood on their own so that it wasn't, the text wasn't like, oh, that's what this is about, that they're still compelling as sculpture. But I also, like I said, it's like I want to put something in the world that has an idea, and I want to make sure that that idea gets carried through at some point. So I include the text. I love words. I love poetry. I love the way an idea is conveyed from it. So that's where that comes from.
Well, it's a great piece. Lauren, should we go to the next one?
Yeah, sure. And this is a piece by Lori Schappe Youens called "If We Get Off My Back."
And Lori, I mean, the other thing is the fact that the two of you not working together, like your colors work so perfect together.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
Yeah, it's quite uncanny. So I work quite intuitively. As I paint, I usually start with just a color and idea, and then I often will begin with the palette knife and sort of allow the paint to sort of skip over certain areas, and then shapes and patterns start to emerge. And with this particular piece, this was sort of part of the Words Matter series, which a couple of my other pieces in the show are also part of. And it's just sort of about communicating and how important, like Nancy was saying, how important words are in our life, how important our connection to one another is. And so what's interesting is because I have two homes, basically, South Africa is, my home, my actual home here is just filled in the, daylight with monkeys. It's vervet monkeys. They take over. And and they're often riding each other's backs and, riding on the top of the house and the trees, and they're very playful. And then, of course, we have cows here in South Africa, but we tend to have more sort of steers and beef cattle, and not so much the dairy cows that we have in the Midwest. So the cow below that the monkey's sitting on, to me, sort of has two imagery patterns going on. On the right side is the dairy cow, the black and white typical Midwestern dairy cow. And then the front is more of the African cow with the horns. And then the colors in this piece, if you look to the right and sort of at the bottom, that's, to me, sort of reflects, again, my Midwestern roots, my love of rivers and lakes, and the beauty of that color. And then on the left, it's a little bit more of the bush felt, the ochres and the softer, smokier colors. And then just obviously the playful nature between the two creatures, he's sort of, the cow's sort of saying, get off my back, and yet they're still buddies. They're still hanging together and having a good time. And as you said so aptly in the foreword, you know, I do use a lot of humor in my work. I find that life can be so tense and so difficult for so many people, and I just find humor is a great way to sort of break through that daily tension that we all have to live with.
Yeah. The monkey has it almost seems like a halo of.
Yeah, I often do halos around my heads. You know, I often do like little crosses on the top, little crowns. This was sort of a crown that was sort of either falling apart, either falling away or forming. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it started out with a lot of little crosses everywhere, and then it was just too much. And those little six just wanted to stay, which I'm sure, you know, as a painter yourself, you understand. Sometimes these symbols want to stay, and sometimes they want to be hidden beneath, you know, your first or second layer of paint. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So you had other things, and you just painted them out because it was too much.
I had masses of them, and it just was too distracting. There was so much pattern. There was so much pattern going on. Like Nancy, I love pattern, and I do love color. And I do the same thing, Nancy, where I just think, all right, just calm it down, just tone it down. You know? You're shouting. Nobody has to shout. And then, you know, I check that beautiful, beautiful tube of paint. I'm like, oh, I'll just try a little bit of that. So yeah.
And Lori, you have been an artist, a professional artist, the most of your adult life.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, I come from a family of creatives. I come from a family of 5. My sister Kim, whom you know, is a ceramicist. My brother Gary was a drawer. Well, doesn't do it anymore, but was a drawer, painter. He does sculpture now. He does really cool garden sculpture. He did jewelry. My brother Greg is a jeweler, and my brother Scott is sort of a tinkerer. He makes really interesting little from found objects. He'll make, you know, really interesting oversized insects. And so we all of us have that in us. And, you know, really it's the only thing I've ever known and loved enough to do for a career. So I suppose, yeah, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, but you made it work, you know.
Yeah. You know, I was saying to Ryan, my partner, it's so interesting because you know how many different hats we have to wear being artists. And I've worn most of them. I've owned and run galleries. I currently teach abstract art out of my studio here. I paint, I do jewelry. I love poetry as well, Nancy. I so understand that. So yeah, it's just, and I think in the creative arts, you have, if you're going to express, you have to express it, whether you're a dancer or a singer or a painter or a ceramicist, you know, or a whatever, a poet. It has to come out, and it's just in me. It cannot be contained.
Right.
I have a question about this piece. There's kind of like these letters and numbers on the cow.
Yeah.
Is there any specific significance of that, or some sort of hidden message?
Good question, Lauren. In this particular piece, no, but I often would look back on pieces and try to figure out where the symbols and numbers come from. They literally pop into my head as I'm working. So I try not to overanalyze them. There are times when I put certain imagery in on purpose. 7 is a favorite number of mine, as is 8. I like the shape. 7 has very significant sort of spiritual meaning for me. So often they appear in my work. And I think it's sort of a subconscious secret language, I suppose.
Yeah. The way you're describing it, it sounds a bit like automatic writing, the spiritualist practice of like just kind of just what comes out.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it's very free form. It's very free flowing. And sometimes it's so fast, I can't even get it out. So, you know, maybe there is something or someone trying to speak through me. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I love it. I love it. I find it so fascinating. And often I don't realize I've done it until I'm done with the work and I stand back and I look and there it is. Yeah.
Well, great. Let's talk about another of Nancy's work that is really fabulous called It's Not All Black and White. And this one's interesting because it's got the middle piece is a soft sculpture. So there's a really cool kind of going back to Nancy's roots as a costumer. There's some really cool soft sculpture going on.
Yeah, it's a really dynamic piece, Nancy, and exuberant. And I'm glad you didn't edit yourself with any of the pattern.
Good. It's a lot in the middle, but it's not all black and white. And so I wanted to make sure that there was a lot of vibrant color in the middle. But as you see on each end, it's really just black and white. And it has to do with there's so much division in our world today, where it's your side and my side, or your belief or my belief. And I just thought, there's so much more that we have in common. And if we would set aside our preconceived notions of what is right and what is true, and just take a minute to think about the other thought, because it's not all black and white. I think we get presented certain facts and we lock into them because of our peers or our culture or whatever biases you, and we have a tendency to just lock into that, and then whoever is not on board with those thoughts we consider our enemy. And it says on the back, let's see, every belief is a limit to what can be, and bias filters our every experience, because bias does filter everything. And I'm not saying that I'm not biased. I'm just trying to learn to be more aware of where those biases are and whether they're true or not. But also not allow for other people's biases, not consider them my enemy just because they don't think the way I do.
Yeah. Well, those are all really good sentiments, Nancy. And in terms of the piece, when we unboxed the work, you delivered it, but they were all beautifully boxed for the drive from North Carolina. And they're attached. When you pull them, when I unboxed them to do the install, I think I could probably take the textiles off their hands if I wanted to, but it's all connected. But it made me feel like metaphorically, these two figures can't really get away from each other. Like we can't, I don't know if you were thinking that, like we can't get away from each other. We're all part of it.
Exactly. We all inhabit this earth. And, if we don't figure out how to inhabit it together, then we're cutting our own throats.
Yeah. And do you work with textile much in your work? I feel like this is the first time we've had a piece like this.
I actually just in the past, I would say 2 or 3 years, I've started more textile. I've done different parts in the past that include textile, but I think I had a whole period of time where I was doing a lot of graffiti and doing a lot of paintings with graffiti, and I think I just explored it to where I just didn't feel like I had anything more relevant to say. And at some point, I don't even know where it started. I was just kind of hand sewing. I love to hand sew, and I started making these little blobs of things, and I thought, they're just sort of a metaphor for stuff, for anything, but just a lot of stuff. And so I've probably done maybe 5 pieces that are using kind of this embroidered sock monkey thought behind the stuff.
That's funny because we have this piece in the show. People saw it in the video at the beginning, or if you've seen the show here, and everyone here has, we have it so you can see the monkey piece behind it.
Yes.
It looks fantastic. Someone needs to get those two pieces are still available and someone should get them together because I want to work together. But I hadn't thought of the obviously funny thing like sock monkeys. Sorry to be corny, but like,
It is. It is. And it is corny. It's really corny. But you gotta love corny.
yeah, no, and it looks like it looks like when you were sewing this and putting this part together, like it's one of those moments in an artist studio when you're just simply having fun and kind of playing.
Exactly.
I think one of the really, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I feel like Lori's monkey painting feels like that too. It feels really playful.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, lots of fun.
Just, I like the visual comparison between you kind of describe them as thought bubbles on their heads, and then how those start in the hands the same color, but then they become this really complicated creation. And it was funny, my dad came and saw the show and he asked me, like, what is this supposed to be about? I'm like, I think it's a conversation, or it's like about making something together. Because, they start, I kind of imagine them like both rapidly crocheting or knitting this kind of thing together. And that's the conversation. And it goes all these different directions and it becomes so much more complicated when they interact than just the thoughts in their head.
And more colorful and more varied and more interesting.
Absolutely. And more beautiful. Yeah.
That's a great observation. Yeah. So should we go to another Lori paint?
Speaking of bubbles, we got this fantastic piece by Lori called My Brew. So this, I understand, is a piece of South African vernacular.
Yes. Yeah, it is, Lauren. It's so when I first moved here, the South Africans love their slang, and it's just fabulous. It's so ingrained in the culture here, and it crosses over all of the different cultures, from Indian to the native blacks to the Afrikaners to the whites to the and then it also crosses over the whole spectrum of religions. And so there's actually a language here called Funigolo, which is just a delightful word in and of itself, and it's a combination of a lot of different cultures. So it's a bit of Zulu and a bit of Afrikaans and a bit of English, and so when I first moved here, I would hear different things, and a lot of men would call each other, "Hey, my brew," and I remembered asking a friend, "What does that mean?" And they just said, "No, it's like my brother. Hey, my brother, my brother." And so this piece to me was, really about men and how they see themselves in the world and how they're trying to balance their lives like, the rest of us are. And so I suppose the earth, sort of the sphere at the bottom, what this person is balancing on is, it's ever evolving and moving, and he's sort of bracing himself and yet sort of half flying. I also live in a village that's big into surfing, and his body shape reminds me a lot of the surfers that we get here. And if you notice that his hands are even kind of webbed, so he's a little bit of a creature from the sea as well. And a little bit of a jester, with his little pointy hats. And I didn't want to make him a particular color. I wanted him to sort of embody what he wanted to embody. So, yeah, thus the different shades of brown and red and pink.
He has a red belly.
Yeah, he definitely has a red belly. I find this is very interesting. Ryan's going to laugh. He's not here right now, but whatever person I'm with currently normally makes it onto the page or onto the substrate. And in this particular painting, it's definitely Ryan's legs. I can't say so much about his appendage because he's a little more well endowed than this chap. But but when I lived with my ex, he had a rather large belly, and so all my paintings were of large bellied men. And this dude, I think he's carrying a lot. He's carrying a lot. He's got like fire in his belly, and as he's trying to balance this balance on top of this sphere. So, yeah, I suppose that explains it.
Yeah.
As best as I can.
Yeah, that's great. And you don't, I mean, I'm trying to think if you've used literally used text in your work much before this body of work.
I have. It's been more like Nancy's, more free-formed writing. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because when I hit 60, I just decided I have some things to say. And I'm going to start saying them. I'm going to say them through my work. And I didn't want it to be just my handwriting. I wanted it to be a little bit in your face. And so then I found some old stencils and just started playing around with stencils. And at first I did it with just charcoal, and it was like, oh, I kind of like that. And I liked the punch that it gave the work, and yeah, it's a very different look for my work, but I'm really enjoying it. I'm going to explore it a little further, see where I go with it.
Yeah, it would be quite different if it was your handwriting, but the fact that the stencil makes it interesting.
Yeah.
I don't even know yet if I can articulate what the power in that really formal stencil is, but it works.
Thank you. It does work. And I just started playing with it. The first one that I did was shrooms, the other long, narrow one I have in the show. And that I looked at a student of mine who had come in for a solo session. And I said to her, I just don't know what to call this piece. And we had just been chatting about, how shrooms have really kind of taken over the land of otherwise in the human condition, and things that, people are really enjoying recreationally and medicinally. And she just looked at me, she went, shrooms? It was like, well, come on. And I thought, I have to have that in there. It's so obvious what's going on, with this little pictorial. And so that was the first one. And then they've just all been sort of coming. I have a whole list of titles and words and things that I want to work around. So it's really fun. It's a fun deviation for me. Yeah.
That's great.
And this is a piece called Holy Hands by Nancy Kubale.
So before I continue, I just wanted to say to Lori that I love the graphic, even if I don't know what it means or what it actually is. I love the graphic of the letters in your work.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that, Nancy.
And this is another point about Lori's work, that I'm kind of interested in how the letters in themselves and numbers are kind of abstract concepts. So it really isn't that dissimilar from the really abstract work, non-representational work that you were doing. It's just like you're using a vocabulary that we all kind of already have. So I just think that's really compelling.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's really fun, and I'm really enjoying exploring it. Yeah, thanks, Lauren.
Okay, so this is Holy Hands, and it has to do with being a maker of things. And I like Lori, I think that there's a point in a lot of women's life where you've lived long enough to have a perspective, and you feel like you have something to say. And for me, that thought is sort of an obligation to not just put more stuff out in the world, but to put ideas out in the world and make work that matters, and put ideas out into the world. And so this is probably more autobiographical than any of the pieces in the show, but I think anyone that's a creative person could identify with that. I have a thought in my head that has just, having been raised Catholic, it's not necessarily a Catholic thought, but there were all these blessings, and also my mother is Irish, so there was always these blessings in our house, and I actually have a tattoo that it's upside down, but it's the initials of "Bless the work of my hands." Because I feel really fortunate that I get to make things for a living. I think if you put me in the woods with nothing at all, I would find some sticks and dirt and I would make them.
Yes.
It's just how I've been wired. And so to me, it's like a certain responsibility to just not put more stuff out there, but make work that's good and true and honest, and that there's a reason to put it out in the world.
Well, and something that I am thinking about, I'm staring at this piece on the screen, and I think what I'm about to say is something that's true of Lori's work too, which is actually kind of a magic act that both of you, we're talking about all these concepts and ideas, but there's all this technical foundation of having to create these objects. And I think so far we haven't really talked about it because it looks so effortless, and that's the genius of it. Like I think that when the viewers look at it, some artists, we get asked more about the technical things because that seems more important. And with the two of you, it's always about the concepts, the way that the work, the way it makes people feel, the questions about the emotions it brings up. And like this piece, to make a sculpture of a human body that looks like it has weight. There are bones under those, under that. She's got a bit of contrapposto, like there's a weight on one leg, and it looks effortless, but there's some real skill to actually make a flesh and blood person. Anyway, bravo to both of you for that, because it just sort of, easy.
Thank you.
I will say that we have had ceramicists comment on the beautiful finishes on Nancy's work. So people who know, I think they see the cool things that are going on. But yeah, that the maker's hand is in some ways kind of absent because of how they look like they've just always existed that way.
Yeah.
Lauren, what you just said is very key to something else that goes hand in hand, but I don't verbalize it as much, but I love ceramics. I love all kinds of ceramics. I still continue to buy ceramics. I'm still in awe. There's always a list of some cup, some me, some artist who I want a piece of, because I just am so in awe of what their finish is. So to me, I feel really grateful when I get to explore something that I haven't had an opportunity to do before. And that said, I don't know if it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, Teresa or Anne maybe asked me if I would do 5 cups for one of your cup shows. And I was not doing anything functional at the time, but oh my gosh, it just started this snowball of finishes, because it was like this permission to take 5 little pieces and just work on finishes. And it kind of opened my world to some things that I had not been doing, and I'm continuing to do now.
I love to hear stories like that, when we ask an artist to do a project that's a little bit out of their wheelhouse, and it inspires a whole movement in their work.
Great. This last one from Lori. Just leave them bones alone. And I have to say, this is probably my favorite of your pieces, Lori. I can't get enough of this piece. The colors, the form, I love it.
Oh, yay. Yeah, this piece, so I am grappling with something right now, and Nancy and Teresa, you're going to love this. I'm not sure about Anne and Lauren, but I know you're both vegetarians. And I'm really starting to lean more and more and more that way. And so this piece is about going way, way back as a child. and I'm sure, the rest of you probably are similar, but I've always collected things. I collect stones and I collect bones and I love skulls. I love them for the sheer beauty of what they hold. I think when I saw the Georgia O'Keeffe paintings for the first time, I was just so mesmerized. And I love the fact that you can find this absolutely perfectly beautiful sculpture, in kind of the middle of the wilderness. And it's quite easy to divorce yourself from what it was, because it's such a different form now. And I suppose this is a little bit of a punch against like the canned hunting that goes on, especially here in South Africa, which is just a despicable trade. And, so it's for my love between animals and wild animals and the bones that they hold, the bones that are in them. I don't know if I'm describing it quite adequately, but I also have a really great love of the American Southwest, where a dear friend, sister of mine, Blair, lives, and I used to be represented out there. And this piece is definitely got a very Southwestern vibe to it. The little shapes and icons and symbols just kept coming out in the face, and then instead of antlers, these protea flowers popped up. And that's our national flower here in South Africa. So again, sort of this combination of the American West and South Africa is pretty apparent. And then I didn't want to do the stencil, just leave them bones alone. I wanted it to be almost like a Wild West sort of, you can kind of hear a little jingle going along with it, so sort of poking fun, but being serious all at the same time, I suppose. Yeah.
Which is what you do.
Which is what I do. That's my gig. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you dropped off this piece, you also touched on a little bit that the bones also could be the remains of Indigenous people that are then dug up and stolen by institutions. So it could also be a reference to
just leave them. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And I lived on a property when I lived in Madison across from my sister Kim, and it had an Indian mound on it, which is really common in certain parts of Madison, especially the Indian Hills area. And I loved the fact that my son, Holden, and at the time he was about 10, he refused to, he would mow the lawn. It was a massive lawn, but he would not mow that Indian mound. And I didn't tell him not to do it. And I was curious one day, and I just said, sweetheart, why are you not mowing the Indian mound? I'm glad you're not, because I would have told you not to. He just said it just didn't feel right. It needed to be left alone. And I love that. I love the sensitivity that he had. And, who knows what it contains, but we have to have, we have to be mindful and hold a really beautiful space for whatever is in there. And we don't need to know, we don't need to go poking around and grabbing, and just leave it alone.
Stop poking around and grabbing. Just to live by.
This piece, like so many of your pieces, Lori, has this really great tension. And you touched on a little of that journey between the United States and South Africa. And they always have, a lot of your work has this very longing feeling, like you're missing the place that you're not, no matter which of those two places you're in. And I think
that is you've hit the nail on the head. When I'm here, I long for family and friends and the land back in America. And when I'm there, I long to be here. I will never be, I'll never be cured of that. It's just part of my DNA now. Yeah. Very, very true.
Well, it's very, very like acute and in this way for you being of two places and feeling like two places are home, but it also feels like in some ways, as we all get older, we always, mourn the path we didn't take, or the the opportunities we didn't have because we went down a different path. And so I think those feelings that come up in these paintings can resonate with lots of people.
Yeah, that's a really, really beautiful point, Teresa. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Is that the last piece, Lauren? Oh, yeah. So, before I don't, sometimes we record these talks and then people can watch them afterwards, and it's streaming on Facebook Live. So I don't know if we have many people watching today. The weather's pretty great, so people might be out. But we'll see if there's
That's
anyone.
all I'm seeing on the page. Love this. Love the opening. Best yet. Fabulous.
So if people want to start typing in any questions, if people are watching, they can start to do that, and we can sort of jump in with questions for a bit. But I'm wondering, Lori and Nancy to each other, like, are there, I don't know. Well, honestly, I'm not sure how much you were aware of each other's work before I paired the two of you.
I had seen Lori's work on the website.
Yeah.
And I think I just fell in love with her color palette.
Yeah.
And before I ever saw any of her figurative representational work.
Yeah, I feel the same way about yours, Nancy. I did a stint. I had a little working stint when Abel was in Paoli, when it was Artisan Gallery, and I had a little working stint there for a while. And I remember seeing your work and just loved it, absolutely loved it. And same sort of thing with the color palette, the figures, the poetry. It just your work just completely resonates with me. And now after meeting
Lori, you were so great. It was Anne was on maternity leave, and you jumped in.
Oh.
Yes, Anne incubating that beautiful little girl.
Yeah, but we didn't get to work together. That was the saddest part.
That was the sad
I was
part.
home. Yeah, I was home snuggling my very tiny baby at the time, who's now 7.
Yeah, lovely.
No, that was Lori and the wonderful Adric Donovan.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, what a lovely young man. We had a lot of fun. We sold some work. We sold some nice pieces. Yeah.
We had a great time. But I'm wondering, I don't know, Lori, and maybe you don't, because we've just sort of talked everything through, but I didn't know if you had any questions for each other.
Just Nancy, why aren't you my neighbor?
I felt like when I met you, I'd known you already. So that's always a good sign. But
Me too.
I wish you didn't live on the other side of the world, though.
I know. I need to just kind of get a really, really, really wealthy benefactor who just wants to fly me around the world on their private jet, and
There you go.
so I can just sort of do all that stuff. So anybody out there who wants to take up a little, artist's cause, so we can flit around the globe together and make a difference.
Each other, yes.
Yeah, and then you could collaborate, and
we could collaborate on the jet. No. You could come here to South Africa, which would be so fabulous. Yeah, I'd love to get all of you here.
Yeah, that would be great. Anne or Lauren, do you have any thoughts? Or
I was wondering, you both have a very spontaneous feel about your work, and I was curious about how much planning you do when you sit down to make a piece, or lack of planning.
Well, I have years and years of sketchbook journal kind of things. And this is the last one. And it's like pages and pages of pictures and drawings and just words and inspiration. And when I sit down to, I generally work in a body of work. I usually do because things require so many different layers of firings. It just makes more sense to work all in wet clay for a while and then work all in starting colorations. And so I usually have a real good vision from the beginning of what I want to do. It doesn't always stay that way, but I start writing notes along with that original sketch, just so that, like, 3 weeks later, when I come back to start doing color or adding words or something, I'm like, okay, what was that piece even about? Because I've already been involved with, 5 or 6 other pieces. And so a certain amount of planning, but also a certain amount of spontaneity, because you have to go where it takes you sometimes.
Mm. Yeah, good point.
How about you, Laura?
I in general don't do a lot of planning. I really start more with a feeling of color. And then as I work, like I said, I normally start with palette knife. I do a lot of palette work. And then it really, really, the story evolves as I work. It's almost like when I've talked to stone carvers, I've worked with soapstone in the past, and, they often say that the actual form is inside that stone, just waiting for them to chip away at and reveal. And that's really kind of how I look at even, working, funnily enough, working 2-dimensionally, I feel that way. Like this little story is waiting to be told, and somehow it's going to unfold. And often I'm completely blown away at the end of a painting. I don't remember working on parts of it. I'm sure you can relate to that too, where I just kind of stand back and go, wow, now what's that about? And so it's literally working with that intuitive process,
Brooms? No, just kidding.
My lips are sealed.
But I wonder, has it always been like that? Because being able to do that, to just stand in front of a canvas and make something, that's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, it's hard and it isn't. I you know what I find hard? I find it hard having a brief, having a commission and having a brief, and being asked to, which is always a privilege, by the way, but being asked to do something and having to come up with that thing that's in someone else's head. It's really a difficult thing for me to navigate because I work so intuitively. And I've done hundreds and hundreds of different commissions and, have had to work on themes, but that little stubborn cowgirl in me just comes out and it's like, I just I want to do what I want to do, it's funny. Yeah.
Well, good.
It's the same.
Okay.
I feel the same about commissions. I actually will not do
hard.
commissions.
Yeah.
Because
I'll do them.
Not so much because I'm worried about their vision, but because I find myself much more self-conscious.
Yes.
And not trying to do something that I think they want. And and of course, no one knows what someone wants for real. And then I always feel it kind of gets, in my personal opinion, and that's not at all other people's experience, but I feel like it ends up getting watered down because I'm afraid of the punch or something. I don't know.
So funny that you'd say watered down, because the word that bubbled up in my mind was diluted. And I think the only type of the best types of commissions are when the artist just honors who you are and they go, just go and do what you do. Do what you do. Maybe give you a size. I mean, that is just the most beautiful thing, and even then I will often get a little hesitant because it's like, oh God, you don't want to let people down, right?
Exactly.
But in the same sense, you have to stay true to your work and your craft and your vision. So yeah, it's a tricky one.
I applaud you for being able to do it, because I feel like I've failed every time. I just fail at it. So
I think your clients might disagree with you, Nancy.
Well, anything else? That was a good question, Anne.
That was a great question.
All right. Well, Lori, I think it's been almost an hour that we've kept you here. So I think we're going to let you go to sleep.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm all buzzy now.
Yeah.
I might want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for a really lovely show and a really lovely exhibition. I think you're one of the first galleries that actually pulled my work away from the wall so you could walk around it. So thank you.
Yeah.
That's
Really,
great.
really lovely. You
Yeah.
curate beautifully. Yeah, the three of you, you curate so beautifully. It's such a stunning space. And yeah, and what an honor to work with you guys. And what an honor to work with you, Nancy. I just feel
And vice
so,
versa.
yeah.
It's
Thank you.
wonderful. Yeah, we're going to be sad. I mean, the show's up for quite a while. So the show is up through June 4th. And for anyone watching this or catching it on Facebook, this will be recorded. The video walkthrough is available now on our website. So you can watch the walkthrough, and every single piece is photographed really beautifully and is on the website as well. If you live in the greater Madison area or anywhere within driving distance, it's totally worth getting here in person if you can. We're here Tuesday through Sunday from 10 to 5. Like-minded. It's just a great show. And we're going to be so sad when it's gone because it's just filling the gallery with so much
Beautiful.
life and joy and beauty. And thank you both so much. You're
Thank
both.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All
Good
right.
night, ladies.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Good night,
Okay.
all.